Hi, this is Ken McCarthy, and today I'm talking with Rich Siegel. And we're going to talk about a very interesting protest that he helped organize around a very important topic. But first, I wanted to let people know who Rich is and what his background is. So, Rich, do you live in New Jersey?
I do. I live in Teaneck, New Jersey.
Gotcha. And my family's originally from New York too. And I remember Horace Greeley or whoever it was said, "Go west, young man." And not
Yes.
everybody went way west. Some people just went from Brooklyn and the Bronx, that's my family, to New Jersey. That's as far as we got.
It is west,
It
and
is
it's not
west,
very far west. You're
but it
you're
is
correct.
west, right?
Yeah.
And millions of New Yorkers ended up moved to New Jersey, and then a whole other batch moved out to Long Island. So you're part of that migration.
Actually, I grew up in Rockland County, New York, which is
Oh,
another suburb, but I'm living now really about a 35-minute drive from where I grew up. It's just either side of that slanted state line that runs southeast to northwest. I grew up north of it. I'm living south of it now.
gotcha. And on the other side of the river, it's Westchester for people that are trying to orient where Rich is.
Yeah.
Rockland's, yeah.
So yeah, Rockland, you cross the river and you're in Westchester. From here, you cross the river and you're in Manhattan.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right. I mean, literally, you can see the river. Can you see the river from Teaneck? I know you can see it from Fort Lee.
Fort Lee's on the river. We're about 5 miles west of the bridge in
Gotcha.
Teaneck.
Gotcha. And so a whole lot of New Yorkers over the generations have moved from Brooklyn, from Queens, from the Bronx to that stretch of land along the Hudson River on the Jersey side. Your profession is musician.
I am a professional musician and a music educator. Yes.
Ah, great, great. And are you a jazz musician specifically, or?
Yeah. I mean, my background is in jazz, and I play jazz. I haven't had a jazz career per se. I'm a freelance musician, and I've done a lot of work in the club date field, society work, clubs, shows, various things, accompanying singers, piano bar work, lots of different things,
Gotcha.
and some jazz work too. Yeah.
Gotcha. In my other life, I run something called Jazz on the Tube, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, and so for just this is a real big sidebar, but to have a jazz career requires a jazz promotion machine. In addition to
Right.
being a musician, it just doesn't happen easily. So you have to, you can be. So there are a lot of. I always tell my subscribers, and they already know this. There's a lot of amazing musicians out there that aren't quote known as jazz musicians only because they don't have the machine edifice to prop their career up that way in that very public way. And then you're also an educator. What kind of people do you teach?
Well, I teach piano and I teach voice both, and I
Oh,
teach people who want to sing at the piano. I
oh
teach
wow.
kids and I teach adults.
Wow,
Uh,
we might have to do a Jazz on the Tube program with you.
okay,
Because
let's do it.
we're very big on education. So you grew up in Rockland,
Yeah.
which is a suburb of New York City, and then you moved to Teaneck. You've been there,
Mhm.
pursuing your art and also helping others develop their skills in the art. And you also are an activist.
Correct.
And look, can you tell us a little about maybe the beginning of your activism when you first said, "Ooh, I got to look into this, and maybe I need to say something and do something."
Well, it's a pretty emotional topic at this point because of the genocide in Gaza, because I don't think any of us anticipated that this level of depravity would be reached. So I was raised Jewish and Zionist, and I was raised by parents who were very active. I mean, I'm old enough that I was a kid during the Vietnam War years, and my parents were very active in opposing the war. And I went to demonstrations as a kid with them.
Mm,
Um, and of course, they supported civil rights. They were basically supporting the leftist agenda. And unfortunately, Zionism and support for Israel at that time was perceived as part of a leftist agenda,
Mm-hmm.
simply because we didn't have the facts at that time that we have now. I was taught an entire narrative that consisted of lies that portrayed Zionism as a program to give the Jews a place of our own that we needed. And I was told that we never did anything wrong to get that place.
Mm-hmm.
And, basically the view that the Jewish people have had about ourselves is that we are inevitably and irrationally hated for no reason by literally everyone who's not one of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I believed that growing up. I've come to see that as child abuse. I've come to see that as absolutely incorrect. And much later in my life, I found out that I'd been lied to all my life, and I found out that that in fact Zionism has been an agenda of criminal activity, an agenda of ethnic cleansing, and that it has created generations of suffering for the Palestinian people. And that is culminating now in the ethnic cleansing that we're seeing in Gaza. So I really had a change in my point of view when I re-educated myself well into my middle age. I mean, I was past 40 when I found out that I'd been lied to all my life about this. And it was disturbing and upsetting enough where I felt that I had to embrace the agenda of the people whom I had been taught were my enemies. And they have since become my friends. And at the same time, a lot of my Jewish friends and family fell away because they didn't want to hear about it, and they couldn't deal with what my perception, they couldn't deal with the fact that my perception had changed and that my attitude had changed so dramatically. And they couldn't make that journey with me. Although I have to say that my parents did. My parents are quite elderly at this point, and they are really horrified with Israel. And when I was growing up, I would have to say that my mother in particular was my primary Zionist indoctrinator. She had all the stories all lined up, and she delivered them to a very young me. And now we are both quite allied in our opposition to Israel and to Zionism generally.
It's so interesting. I mean, because every human being wants to belong to a group. It's just natural, and it's not, and it doesn't mean that that's not a bad thing, and it doesn't mean that you disrespect or mistreat other groups. It just means, hey, this is our group, which is just normal.
You're touching on a very profound and deep story there. I mean, human beings, we are pack animals, yeah, and we survive through cooperation, and we cooperate in groups, and those groups form their own languages and cultures and identity. And it's the history of humanity that this tribe on one side of the mountain is fighting the tribe on the other side of the mountain. They just don't understand each other because their customs are different, and that's, you're telling the story of human history. But hopefully in the 21st century, we're becoming civilized to the point where we don't cling to tribe in the way that our ancestors did, that we can see the oneness of all humanity. And ideally, that's part of the function of religion. I mean, if we believe in one God, then it just follows that we believe in one humanity. And clearly that's not happening in, I don't want to say Judaism, but in the way that Zionists interpret Judaism. And many Zionists are atheists anyway. So
Yeah, that's the irony of all this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was raised, and that was really the first step in my changing my point of view, was that I came into an awareness of one God. I was raised in an atheist home. I was raised, I think, in a synagogue where it was a Reformed synagogue, and I think most of the members were atheists. And that's an irony of the Reform movement, because the Reform movement was established first in Germany. And it was meant to be a way to get at the spiritual foundations of Judaism without having to obey 613 laws that made it impossible for Jews to mix in the culture around them. So Reform Judaism was supposed to be about spirituality, but by the time I was raised in a Reform synagogue, it kind of turned on its head, and it became a place where atheists could worship the twin Jewish idols of Jewish tribe and Jewish state. So I was raised without an awareness of God, and I was raised, in an atheistic setting in which being Jewish and supporting the state of Israel were really the most important things in our lives, but it was so hollow. And of course, it was based on this belief that everybody hated us for no reason at all, and actually they resented us because we are so morally and intellectually superior. I mean, it was basically an atheistic, tribal, narcissistic, nasty trip. And the first step out of that for me was coming into an awareness of one God. And with that, I really became disgusted with the way I was raised. But I still hung on to Zionism and supporting Israel because the brainwashing was so deep. I still believed most of the lies that I had been taught. So I think for a lot of years, I was what you would call a liberal Zionist, which I understand today is an oxymoron, because Zionism is not in any way, shape, or form a liberal or progressive agenda. But, I believed the lies that we went to Palestine to establish a Jewish community, and we went there wanting to be the friendly neighbors of the Arabs, and they just hated us for no reason, just like everybody hates us for no reason. So that was, even though I had left what I called the cult of atheist Zionism posing as Judaism, even though at this point I had a focus in my life on one God, I still believed the Zionist lies. So I supported the state of Israel, but I didn't support the right-wing zealots who wanted all the land. I was basically like a two-stater. But then that all fell away when I re-educated myself about the history and learned that Zionism has always been an agenda of ethnic cleansing, and that there was always the intention to remove the native population, and that the wars that have existed have been wars of aggression and wars of conquest started by Israel, resulting in land grabs. The one exception being 1973, when Egypt tried to put an end to Israel, and should have succeeded, except that the United States provided Israel with all the military support they needed to turn that around.
And when we say put an end to Israel, you know, I'm going to project that really what you're saying is the regime there, not, you know, eliminating the people, maybe not even eliminating the country, but maybe de-Zionizing the country in the way that Germany had to be denazified after World War II.
Well, that's exactly right, and I think that it's really important to make that distinction, especially, for example, a big deal is being made now about the slogan, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." You know, and Jews who see anti-Semites everywhere and who still believe that in 1948, the Jew-hating Arabs tried to push us into the sea. You know, that was the lie that we were all taught. Whereas in fact, we succeeded in pushing a lot of them into the sea. In Jaffa, people drowned when they were being shoved out of their homes.
We're talking now about the indigenous people living in Palestine shoved
Yes,
into, yeah.
the Palestinian Arabs, we
Yep.
drowned them, among other many horrible things we did to them. But, you know, I'm getting sidelined, but, you know, back to this slogan, "From the river to the sea," what does it mean? It doesn't mean killing all the Jews. It means from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free for Muslims and Christians and Jews and whoever else is there. It means free. Now, a distinction has to be made between the denazification of Germany and the de-Zionization of Israel, and that is that Germany is named Germany, or Deutschland in German, okay? That's its name, and that name has continued. The name Israel is a Zionist name. The name Israel has been slapped on to Palestine by the Zionist agenda, okay? So once you have a democratic state in place there, once you have one person, one vote for every rightful citizen, which includes the Palestinian refugees and their descendants upon their return. Once you cease having an artificial Jewish majority, which is maintained by keeping that refugee population out, and once you have a unified land with a naturally occurring Arab majority, they will vote out the name Israel. So Israel will cease to exist with that name.
Gotcha. We're talking about the name and the ideology that's the place was founded on and is currently run on. That's what needs to be eliminated, not the people. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, there will be a Palestine in which everyone will be free. I mean, it's a really simple concept. You just end all Jewish supremacy. You end all Jewish privilege.
Well, let's call it Zionist Jewish privilege. You know what I mean? Or supremacy. I think there. You know what I mean? I mean, this is just me. This is me.
Right. I mean, you know, it's a difference in terms. I mean, and in a way, calling it Jewish supremacy and Jewish privilege is accurate, because that's what Zionism is. And for me, even as an anti-Zionist, I have the right, and I'd be compensated to become a West Bank settler tomorrow,
right?
Okay? Because I'm a Jew, because I was born from a Jewish mother, okay? Now, I'm a little bit too well known at this point, so I may be prevented from even entering the country. I don't know.
I have a feeling they're not going to roll the red carpet out for you.
No, I mean, I was there a few years ago, but at this point, who knows if they'd let me in at all. But the point I'm making is that whatever a Jew's personal ideology is, a Jew is going to be welcome in Israel based on Israel's Jewish supremacist policies. I mean, you know, they've got the right wing and the left wing and everything in between. And, you know, so that's what they are. So
So in other
rather
words,
than calling it Zionist Jewish supremacy, I would say that Zionism is Jewish supremacy, and that many Jews do not embrace Zionism, and that's always been the case.
yeah, even as Zionism was getting, before anyone really understood where it was leading. And by the way, if anybody wants to know where Zionism leads, we're watching it right now. This is the logical outcome of the ideology. But even going back to the 19th century, when maybe people didn't know, well, where is this headed, there were plenty of Jewish people that were vehemently opposed to the idea of Zionism. I want to go back to something earlier that we were talking about, which
Well,
is
just to
please
clarify,
do.
I mean, before you proceed, I put the beginning of the Zionist movement at 1895 with Herzl's book,
Okay.
Der Judenstaat. So if we want to talk about early Zionism, we're really talking about early 20th century rather than the 19th century. And, you know, at that point, you know, early Zionism was a secular Jewish movement. It was largely an atheistic movement, and it was rejected by Orthodox Judaism 100%. They only embraced it much later through some manipulations of their religion that were started by a Rabbi Koch back in the 1920s, when he proclaimed that even though the Messiah hasn't come, that we're entering the Messianic era. A pure manipulation, because Zionism was appealing. So they wanted to embrace it, and they used that as an excuse. But still, a very significant number of Orthodox Jews continue to reject Zionism and have always rejected Zionism.
And going back to the idea of the tribal feeling that we all have, you know, we all want to be part of a group. I think that what Zionism did was weaponize that natural human desire. You know, embracing your own culture doesn't mean fighting with and hating with a different culture. It doesn't lead to that necessarily. But Zionism, you know, using that natural human, exploiting and weaponizing that natural human instinct, created this. I often describe it as a cult.
Well, it is a cult, and I'm a cult survivor. There's no doubt about it. But I mean, I want to gently disagree with you about the idea that everybody wants to be part of a group. I don't.
Okay.
I mean, I really don't. I mean, I come from this cult, as you called it, and I also call it a cult, which was this little bubble where we told each other the same lies, and we believed that the whole world hated us for no reason. And you know, that's how Israel is operating now. It's this us and them mentality. And you know, I live on a block where, you know, I've got a Muslim family next door. I've got a Latino family across the street. I've got a Black family down the street. I've got white people of different nationalities. I mean, I like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
I don't need to identify as Jewish. I don't need to identify as American. I mean, my awareness of one God directs me to see all human beings as my brothers and sisters, period, end of story. I mean, you know, you can worship where you want. You can, you know, walk around with whatever shade of skin you've got, you know, but you're all my brothers and sisters. In fact, I mean, just on that subject, I was actually excommunicated from the Jewish religion by an Orthodox rabbi based on his inability to convince me that there was a value in Jewish tribal identity. That was our discussion.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I actually sought him out because I was he was an anti-Zionist rabbi. So I did not, you know, I didn't want to talk to a rabbi who was a Zionist because that would obviously get in the way. But an anti-Zionist Orthodox rabbi from the Breslau sect. And, you know, our conversation was basically, is there a value in being a member of this group? And he tried to convince me that there was. I was not convincible. And finally, he got fed up with me and he said, you don't have a Jewish soul.
Whoa.
Yeah. The first thing he told me when we started talking is that you have a Jewish soul. And that's why you have to be a member. And then when I couldn't be convinced, he said, you don't have a Jewish soul. You chose to incarnate after the Holocaust as a Jew to help out, but you're too weak for the task, so I'm removing you. You are out of the Jewish people now. And he claimed that he had the right to do it. And I thanked him, and I asked him to put it in writing, but he wouldn't put it in writing. But I still have the story to tell. So I don't think there's any value in tribes at all. I think there used to be, because we needed them to survive. And now we don't need them anymore. I mean, I think human survival at this point is dependent upon our seeing each other as brothers and sisters across the globe. I think our human survival at this point necessitates our discarding tribe.
Gotcha. I don't disagree at all. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is, I love that people speak different languages. I love that they cook differently.
Sure.
I love that they play different music.
Yeah.
I'm glad they've got that thing, and I love it. So we're not
Well,
really
now we're talking about diversity.
Yeah.
And diversity is beautiful. I mean, I value diversity. What I don't value is tribal identity.
Gotcha. I gotcha. Yeah, because implicit in tribal identity is it's us versus them, and then you take
Exactly.
and then you take a Zionist propaganda campaign which amps that up to the nth degree. And we were talking about cult behavior. If you look at what a cult does, and we're talking about a malignant cult, because whenever people get together, it's culture, and it's kind of, you have the same belief, you share beliefs, you share working methods, everything's kind of a cult in a sense. But then there's malignant cults, and the malignant cult says it's us versus them. The other side hates us. They're trying to get us. We have to keep to ourselves. This is classic cult indoctrination. So when Rich and I use the word cult, we're not just pulling something out of thin air here. This is the definition of a malignant cult.
Yeah, and I think you and I have slightly different definitions of the term cult, because I see them all as malignant, and I think a non-malignant cult would just be, in my mind, a group. But since you bring it up, as I was processing my re-education about Zionism, and basically I started investigating it and fell into a really deep state of shock, and was motivated to just read and read and read, everything I could get my hands on for about 8 years. And, and then I connected with people, with Palestinians, with Israelis, different people who knew the situation better than I did. And as I was going through that process, the thing that kept coming to mind was Jonestown and Jim Jones and that cult, because there's so many similarities. I mean, Jim Jones's church started in San Francisco, and there were abuses in the church. And so, they were starting to be investigated, and Jim Jones was starting to become paranoid. And so he moved everybody to Guyana, right? And in Guyana, they became this cult of everybody hates us for no reason, so we have to be in this little bubble here in Guyana, And then when a congressman and his crew went down to investigate, all hell broke loose. I mean, they killed the congressman, and then, you ended up with this dramatic scene of 900 plus bloated bodies, having taken this cyanide-laced Kool-Aid, and we saw pictures of that, and it was just so shocking. But then put into perspective, the number 900, and this was a mass suicide. They weren't killing outside their cult.
Right.
But the Zionist cult is so much more destructive than that, and it's based on the same premise. We're all in this fortress Israel,
right?
Because everybody hates us for no reason.
Yep.
And so we have to defend ourselves no matter what. and we need this land no matter what. So all their aggressive behavior is excused as defense.
Yeah.
And instead of, 900 members of the cult dead of mass suicide, we've got in Gaza right now, the news is saying 30,000, but I'm hearing it's more like 35,000 innocent Arab people in this massive slaughter in Gaza. And anybody would say that what happened in Jonestown was crazy, right?
Right.
Because so few of us were part of it. And we just saw these bodies laying out in the sun. But so many people in positions of power are treating this situation in Gaza like it's reasonable.
Yeah.
I mean, we had this congressman from Tennessee saying, well, just kill them all. I don't know if you saw that little
I did.
comment.
Yeah.
We've got, world governments have supported this. I mean, the United States and Canada and the UK and Germany are behind Israel no matter what. And we've got all these Zionist organizations that are, AIPAC vets all our politicians, and the ADL will call anybody who says anything like what I'm saying an anti-Semite, or in my case, a self-hating Jew.
Right.
So you've got a cult that's really working on the same premise that Jonestown worked on, but is doing infinitely more damage, but is protected by people in positions of power. I don't know what to do about it except for just talk to you,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
this
is what I'm
it-
doing. I talked, I spoke to the Teaneck Town Council, and it went viral, we had this big we had this big demonstration here in Teaneck when they had the real estate sale. Excuse me, I'm sniffling.
Sure.
So we had this big demonstration in Teaneck when they had the real estate sale, but just the other night, they shut one down in Brooklyn. There was a real, I don't know if you're aware of that, a real estate event that was going to be put on by the same company was shut down. And then they moved it online. It became a Zoom meeting instead of an in-person meeting.
Let's get into that in detail. There's just a few things I want to.
Yeah.
One thing that came to mind is, as you're talking about, we're talking about the Zionist cult of Israel. This is a cult, a malignant cult that has modern weapons, and they're being resupplied on a daily basis by the UK and the US. And so yes. You're right. This is an incredibly dangerous cult. And there's one little philosophical thing I want to talk with you about. You mentioned that for the Zionists, or let's say the modern Reformed modern Reformed Judaism, which may be atheist, their twin gods are the tribe and the state. Now, in listening to some ultra Orthodox rabbis who are outspoken against Zionism still, the word idolatry comes up a lot, and of course that comes up in Islam as well. You're not even allowed to represent a holy person. Things have to be geometrical and so on. In a sense, when someone's talking about one God, this idolatry thing actually is an important issue, because you're either with the one God or you're with some other thing. You're with the state, you're with the tribe, you're with this, you're with that. And so this, and it's this idolatry, which sounds like this, ancient biblical concept. And what the heck are they talking about? And I think even in the Old Testament, I think God was saying to the ancient Jews, don't have false idols, don't worship the golden cow, whatever it was, right? There's a very important message there, which is there's one God, therefore we're one people. If there's one God, you can't have all these different, and so in a sense, in an extreme way, Zionism is a highly idolatrous. Thank you very much. Yeah. Not adulterous, but they may be adulterous too, but they're idolatrous. And so maybe that ancient precept of, hey, no idolatry, guys, one God. Maybe that's an important topic for us to not to for you and I
Well,
to talk about, but for us to just keep in mind that maybe there was some wisdom back there that we shouldn't throw out
yeah,
or
well,
discard.
it's a really important topic, and I think it's kind of it's the topic on which everything turns, because you know Judaism forbids Zionism. That's absolutely the truth. And I know how it forbids Zionism. And one thing that I know about Judaism is that everybody has a different view of it. I mean, you can't look at these black hats and assume that they're experts in Judaism
But
just because
what's
they're
the
Orthodox.
what's the old saying? And this applies to so many other other
Yeah.
groups. Two
Two
Jews, three
Jews, three
opinions.
opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that applies especially about the religion. So you start talking to these guys about the religion, and you realize that they all disagree with each other.
Right.
But I've had conversations with Neturei Karta Jews who are anti-Zionist, and I know how Judaism forbids Zionism. But Zionism is also rooted in Judaism, and it's rooted in Judaism because, first of all, it puts us in exile, and then we return from exile, and the place we're in exile from is Palestine. So Zionism represents this return. But it's supposed to happen when the Messiah comes. Well, to most of Judaism, we look forward to a Messiah who's, kind of like waiting for Godot. He doesn't really ever come, okay?
Uh-huh.
So we're always trying to strive to be better. We're obeying the law, and sooner or later, we're going to be rewarded with a Messiah. But it's like, pie in the sky. All of a sudden, political Zionism says, we're returning now, period. And
the hell with God.
Huh?
The hell with God is what they're saying.
Well, but then the religious Zionists say, okay, we've entered the Messianic era, even if the Messiah isn't here. So yeah, we're returning. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing about that is that a lot of Jews are not descended from ancient Judea. The Palestinian Muslims and Christians are. I'm not. And the ADL is going to call me an anti-Semite or self-hating Jew for saying, I'm an Ashkenazi Jew, I'm white. I'm descended from European converts to Judaism. So what happened? My ancestors converted to a religion that contains the belief that we're going to return to a place that we don't even come from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an absurdity about the religion itself. And then the other problem that I see that leads to idolatry is the whole concept of the chosen people. And I've come to understand that a better translation might be the designated people.
Mm.
And what that means is that we follow 613 laws.
Literally, just so for people who don't know this, Rich is not exaggerating. In traditional classic Judaism, there are 613 laws.
Yes. Now, some of those laws don't apply anymore because they pertain to having slaves. Mm-hmm. And by the way, Judaism never outlawed slavery, but we don't actually have slaves. So there's a lot of laws that make it impossible for us to mix in the larger culture. But ideally, what that does is it makes us follow these laws so that we can be, quote, a light unto the nations, so that in our holiness, in following all these laws, we can be an example to everyone else. If taken with great humility, that could actually be a pretty good thing, but it's not, because inevitably it sets us apart, and it sets us up as feeling superior, and it sets us up in a sort of a tribal narcissistic head trip, and it sets us up to look at the other, look at the goyim as being less than, as being dirty, as being, don't associate with them, okay? So this thing that it's just, if you start out with a chosen people, it becomes a slippery slope to worshiping tribe as an idol.
Hmm.
It's not so hard to get there.
Yeah.
And to me, this is what's at the root of the problems that Jews have had through the ages. Not so much in the Arab and Muslim world, because the Arab Muslim world, I mean, there were problems there for Jews too, but not as much as in Europe. And that has to do with the really nasty relationship that Judaism and Christianity have. And, you know, I see a lot of fault on both sides, you know.
Oh yeah,
because
for sure.
Christianity had the Inquisition and the Crusades. And by the way, it was Muslims who came to the rescue of Jews in both of those cases. But then the Jewish Talmud says a lot of really nasty things about Jesus and Christianity. So, you know, it's been a hate-hate relationship for 2,000 years. Maybe we can end all that, you know. I just get to a point in discussing this where I just become so sad about it and fed up with it, because, you know, this thing has been such a huge part of my life, having been raised on the wrong side of this issue and then having changed sides. I just never dreamed that it would become so depraved where we'd be talking about 35,000 dead in Gaza, and we'd be looking at Israeli rap artists performing songs about settling in Gaza and killing all the Gazans. And this is happening right now. I mean,
Yeah.
Israeli society has become that depraved.
It's the only word for it. It's really
Yeah, it's the word for it. And you know, here we are in the United States, where our government, I mean, you know, Trump was Israel's favorite American president ever, and Biden is totally enabling the genocide. I mean, who have the Palestinians got to support them? Absolutely nobody. I mean, you know, the Democrats and the Republicans like to disagree on lots of different issues, but, you know, they're in lockstep about supporting Israel no matter what Israel does. And we're getting to the point where that's not working anymore. And I was one of about 500,000 people on the street in Washington, D.C. on January 13th. And it's happening all over the world. The people of the world understand that Israel is a criminal state, period. But we still have so much. I'm sorry?
Yeah, let's if we may, let's talk about your operation your in Teaneck, which was so intriguing and so useful and helpful. Let's set the stage for us of what was going on. How did you find out about it? What did you find out about it? And then as you looked into it, and then what action did you take, and with whom, and how did it go? You mentioned there was success in Brooklyn and actually stopping one of these auctions, but let's start from foundation level, assuming nobody knows a thing about any of this.
Okay, so basically it's been going on for a long time.
And what is it? What is it?
Okay, so what we're talking about is Israeli real estate being sold directly to American Jews, and for sure Canadian Jews in Canada. Maybe it's happening in the UK and Europe and Australia too, I don't know. But there are real estate companies who are selling Israeli real estate, including both Green Line real estate in Israel and illegal West Bank settlement real estate.
Gotcha. So just a minor detail, Green Line means it's within the recognized international boundaries of what's called the State of Israel. And then West Bank is, people should know in case they don't, because not everybody knows everything. West Bank belongs to the Palestinians. It's been militarily occupied brutally. Brutally. There's no such thing as a kind military occupation, by the way, if anybody's ever been in one. Brutally since 1967. I'm probably, you know, I'm born in 59. So the vast majority of my life, there's been a military thing, and that means tanks in the streets. That means troops in the streets. That means martial law. That means kids being
Sometimes
shot.
it means that. I mean, I've been there, and that's not a daily occurrence, but abuse is a daily occurrence.
Gotcha. So anyway,
So
that's the distinction is some of the properties in Israel proper, some of it's in what should be Palestine.
right, okay, so that's absolutely correct. So these real estate companies are selling the real estate in both locations. And it should be pointed out that the West Bank settlements are illegal according to international law. International law, I think it's the Fourth Geneva Convention, states that an occupier may not move its own population into territory that it occupies. Now, so by Green Line Israel, we're talking about, and it should be pointed out that Israel has no official borders and never has, because they're expansionist. Oh, Israel has no constitution and never has, because they don't want to give everybody equal rights. Everything is manipulated there, okay? So in 1948, when the state of Israel was established, it had conquered more territory than was allotted to it by the UN partition plan. So the state of Israel was established on 78% of historic Palestine. We're calling that Green Line Israel because that's what the line is called that designated that demarcation. The land on the other side of that green line was initially taken over by Jordan and Egypt. The West Bank and East Jerusalem by Jordan, and Gaza by Egypt. Then in 1967, Israel attacked its neighbors and conquered the rest of that land. So Israel has been occupying the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza since 1967. It's also been occupying Syria's Golan Heights. It did occupy the Sinai, which belonged to Egypt, and then it returned the Sinai in a deal in 1978, I think. So back to the real estate sales. They are selling real estate in Green Line Israel, and they are selling real estate in the West Bank settlements, which are illegal under international law. Now, I first learned about these real estate events back in 2007. I organized a demonstration against one for the first time.
Wow.
And, you know, I did the same kind of publicity that I'm doing now. It never got a whole lot of attention, but since this Gaza genocide, people are paying more attention. And I talked in front of the Teaneck Town Council, and all of a sudden I've got Emma on Majority Report playing this video and calling me badass.
Right.
I like that.
It was a good line. We'll play it at the end of the interview, or maybe at the beginning. And you said,
oh, you saw that, huh?
Yeah. Oh, of course. I think the whole
Okay.
world saw it. I love it. And for people that haven't seen it, at one point you go, there's going to be a protest. And I forget how you said it. Maybe you can remember it better. And I know there's going to be a protest because I'm going to run it.
Yeah, well, that wasn't my exact words, but,
Yeah.
but yes, I did say something like that.
So
I organized a demonstration against a similar event back in 2007. And, you know, we got, I don't know, 60, 70 people out on the street in front of this synagogue, and we protested. They had their sales event, and that was it. And now I'm trying to do the same thing. I'm trying to shut them down again. And I actually succeeded, because I did not succeed in getting the event in Teaneck shut down, but we had a massive demonstration against it. You know, instead of 60 or 70 people showing up, we had, I think, at least 1,000 people showed up. I mean, the media is I've seen different media sources calling it hundreds of people or
Mm.
thousands of people. I'm putting it at 1,000. But it was, for a suburban demonstration, it was massive.
That is
And
huge.
it was, I would call it a great success. And then an even bigger success came this week when the same company was going to have a similar event in Brooklyn, New York. And an activist organization that has a legal team served them with papers, and they shut down. So that event was actually shut down. However, they did the event on Zoom. So the physical event was shut down, but then, you know, they're on the defensive now. They're digging their heels in. They're going to do it whatever way they can do it, you know. And that's part of the way things are evolving, is that now that there is so much support for Palestine and there's so much objection to Zionist activity, the Zionists are digging their heels in, and these real estate events are very successful too. They're more popular, and more Jewish Zionists are going to them. You know, one thing that I should say about these events is the legal question. First of all, the West Bank settlement homes are illegal under international law. So if real estate companies are allowed to sell them here, they're enabling us to violate international law. So by proxy, or by extension, we are violating international law.
Yeah.
And the point I was making to the town council is, do we want to allow a synagogue to do this? I don't think we do. The other legal question has to do with domestic anti-discrimination law. So we had a Civil Rights Act in 1964. I said 1965 in my talk, I was incorrect. We had a further clarification of the Civil Rights Act in the form of a Fair Housing Act in 1968. So those are federal laws that were put in place. It's come to my attention since that there are also New Jersey laws pertaining to anti-discrimination, and there may even be a loophole where religion is concerned, where religious institutions may be allowed to sell just to their own.
Mm.
But then, is this really a religious real estate sale when so many Zionist Jews are atheists? They're not doing this for God. They're doing it for tribe.
And they're not creating a religious, you know, compound where people, you know, practicing the same religion all live together. That kind of makes a little sense. But if
Right.
you're talking about stolen land,
Right.
and it's atheists buying it, you know, how is this religious?
Right. I mean, in fairness, a lot of the West Bank settlements are religious settlements and are populated by Orthodox Jewish Zionist ideologues. So a lot of them are religious, and they do see this as a religious activity. But my understanding of our anti-discrimination laws is that we're not allowed to have real estate sold or real estate available to whites only.
Imagine that, right? I mean, imagine if there were a real
Yeah.
estate auction tomorrow in Teaneck or Brooklyn, and it said, "Great, but you got to be white to bid."
I mean,
my God, that'd be,
the uproar would be ridiculous.
and
I
it would be
mean,
correct.
but of course it would be correct. But
Yeah.
we used to have redlining. I mean, this
Of
is
course.
why we had a Civil Rights Act. This is why we had a Fair Housing Act, was because African Americans were prevented from living in many places due to redlining. Well, Israeli real estate is all redlined within Green Line Israel and in the West Bank settlements. Most of the real estate that's for sale here, whether we're talking about the West Bank settlements or within Green Line Israel, most of that real estate that these real estate companies are selling here is available to Jews only. Now, the real estate companies and the synagogues, they're backpedaling. They're saying, well, First of all, they're saying they're not actually selling the real estate. They're only giving informational talks about the real estate, okay? I happen to know that that's not true because I did a little political theater a few years ago where I made an appointment at one of these events, and I brought a female friend who posed as my wife, and we sat through a sales presentation on a West Bank settlement. And at the conclusion of that presentation, we pulled out Palestinian flags and we said, this is why we're here, okay? Yeah, I did that. So I know that they're selling real estate because they tried to sell it to me. All right. Now, the other way they're backpedaling is they're claiming that these events are open to non-Jews. They're claiming that they're not exclusively for Jews. Now, that was tested weekend before last in Toronto when a non-Jewish man tried to get into a real estate event in Toronto, in Canada. And they wouldn't let him in. And not only wouldn't they let him in, but when he asked where he could park, he was told, you can park up my ass, quote, okay? So they're not letting Jews, they're not letting non-Jews into these events. Even if they were to do so, they can't sell real estate to people who can't move into that real estate. The real estate itself is designated for Jews only. How are you going to sell that real estate to a non-Jew? So, you know, when they say they're letting non-Jews in, all right, maybe they'll let somebody in the door, but they can't sell them real estate.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha. And
they're backpedaling and they're just full of it, you know.
And so this has been going on for years.
Oh yeah, it's been going on for a long time. And, you know, I haven't organized demonstrations against all of them through the years because I've been busy with other things. Sure. And, you know, I missed a few of them. Although I've been pretty diligent about organizing demonstrations, for example, against Friends of the IDF when they have a fundraiser and things like that. But I'm sure I missed some of these real estate presentations. But, you know, now it's particularly obscene when Israel is committing a genocide to be selling Israeli real estate, including illegal West Bank settlement real estate, down the street from where I live. I don't want that. I mean, it's a stinking sewer and I smell it from here. I don't want that down the street from me.
Yeah.
And I believe that they're violating the law. If they're not violating the letter of the law, they're certainly violating the spirit of the law.
Sure. And this is land on the West Bank side that was literally stolen and then settled violently often. And now it's all been prettied up, I guess. They put roads in and
well, I mean, I've been to the West Bank. I mean, I could speak to that.
Okay, yeah, please do.
Well, I mean, there are still, and God help them maintain, there are still many Palestinian villages and towns, and even the city of Al-Khalil, Hebron, is there. You've got the Christian triangle, Bethlehem, Beit Sahur, and can't remember the name of the third one.
Yep.
And you've got East Jerusalem, which is Arab. But you've got villages scattered around the West Bank, and you've got Jewish settlements on hilltops, mostly on hilltops. Then you've got the urban settlement in Hebron, which has really violent right-wing settlers there who are really awful. I've been there. And you can cut the tension there with a knife. But you've got a situation where the settlements are being placed strategically so as to prevent a Palestinian state from ever happening. Mm-hmm. And you've got, I think the population of Jews on the West Bank now is up to about 700,000.
That's what I've heard, yeah. And these are all people that have been moved into there post 1948.
Well, no, post
I'm
1967.
sorry, 67.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, and there are some very big settlements like Ariel and some others, and then there are some smaller ones, but there are roads for Jews only that Palestinians are not allowed on, and you've got different license plates so that you can tell who's a Jew and who's a Palestinian. This is an apartheid setup here, and you've got different water rights, so that, for example, I stayed at a friend's home in Beit Sahur in the Christian Triangle. This friend has citrus trees on his property. He's got a gorgeous old home. And the citrus trees are alive, but he doesn't have the water he needs to irrigate them enough to bear fruit. Okay. But you walk out his front door and you look across the valley, there's a hilltop settlement, which is a Jewish-only settlement, obviously, where they have plenty of water for their swimming pools. All right. So you've got a system where the settlements are being placed strategically so as to prevent a Palestinian state from ever forming. And then you have a military occupation and various means of harassment and humiliation to try to get the Palestinians fed up with their situation that they hope that they'll leave. And they won't, because they're very dedicated. While I was there, we picked olives for a Palestinian family, because a lot of times they're out in their own olive groves and their fields, and they're harassed and even shot at by settlers. We visited the Tamimi family in Nabi Saleh, which is a real hot spot. I mean, this family, they're stoic beyond belief. I have so much admiration for them. But they have plenty of land where they could be growing some crops, but they can't. They can't go out on their own land because they get shot at. And this is the story in many places. And this is the cult mentality where these settlers go there, thinking, first of all, I don't know how the mentality works. And yet I do, because I was raised in it. But it's this feeling that we're entitled to this place, but that we never did anything wrong to get us, and that to get the land, and that everybody hates us for no reason. I can't, it's hard for me to even describe the mentality, because it's hard for me to believe that I ever bought it.
Well, one definition of cultism is it's impervious to rationality. In other words, by definition, cults don't make sense deliberately. I mean, because in order to, that's one of the ways that keeps you locked into the cult. The thing makes absolutely no sense, and you buy it, and you don't question it, and that keeps you locked in. Because if you apply rationality to it, you're out of there.
Well, and I did, and I'm out.
Yeah.
But as long as we're talking about the definition of a cult, there's one aspect of a cult that does not fit with Zionism, and that is that there is usually a powerful leader, a powerful individual like Jim Jones, who's in charge of the cult, and everybody worships that leader, and the leader's in total control. And in this case, there isn't one personality, and in fact, any personality that you could name is probably loved by some and hated by others. If we talk about Netanyahu, for example, or Meir Kahane was, the leader of the most extremist element of the Zionists until he was assassinated. So, to me, the ultimate cult leader is the tribe itself, and this belief that in the tribe as an idol, and that the tribe has so much value. But it's, no, I just lost my.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But going back to help people really understand, and you've painted the picture beautifully. So, contrary to Zionist propaganda, the East Bank, the West Bank is not a desolate undeveloped place that, you know, was not being used by human beings. Plenty of farming, plenty of orchards, citrus, olive. The people are great farmers.
Well, and towns and cities. I mean, you know, you're reminding me of this ultimate Zionist lie that Palestine was a land without people for a people without a land.
Right.
You know, and they also love to quote Mark Twain, who made some comment about, you know, when he toured Palestine, and he commented that some areas that he was in, you know, were fairly empty. But, you know, when you know who Mark Twain was, and can you imagine him rolling in his grave when he's being used by Zionists to justify, you know, their agenda? I mean, it's
For people that don't know,
didn't.
Mark Twain, because this is sort of censored from our history books, was one of the great American anti-imperialists.
Absolutely, absolutely. So he would hate being used for Zionist agenda. But you know, Palestine was never empty, and the West Bank was never empty. I mean, there was absolutely a society in place with cities and towns and villages and industry and agriculture. And Zionists went in there and ethnically cleansed most of it, and are in the final stages of doing that.
So in the West Bank, we've got, you know, over 700,000 Zionists have moved in since 1967. They've created these hilltop communities. They have taken a lot of the water for their swimming pools and their lawns, I guess. Meanwhile, farmers who've been there for multiple generations are having trouble keeping their orchards alive. You have some true, I mean, even crazier than crazy Zionists shooting at farmers just simply trying to tend their crops on their own land. And in the context of all this, you have real estate sales in Teaneck, New Jersey, sponsored by synagogues. I mean, it couldn't get crazier.
Correct.
And I assume these are Reform synagogues.
No, they're Orthodox.
Oh, they're Orthodox. Oh, okay.
Orthodox.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
good.
yeah. And I honestly, I don't think Reform synagogues would do this.
Okay, that's good to know.
As Zionist as they are, and I mean, I was raised in a Zionist Reform synagogue, and I'm in touch with that rabbi. And, you know, I know that he takes his congregation on tours of Israel. They do all of that. But these real estate events are happening in modern Orthodox synagogues specifically. And the modern Orthodox are right-wing Zionist zealots, and they use a religious justification for Jewish settlement. To give you an example, and I think that it's due to their extreme ideology that they have attracted, or that they have decided to sponsor these real estate events. But I mentioned that the first time I organized a demonstration against one was in 2007. When I organized that, I was naive enough to think that a conversation with the rabbi would lead to some result. I mean, not that I really thought I could convince him to shut it down, but I had to try. And it was interesting that this is Rabbi Stephen Pruzansky at the B'nai Yeshurun synagogue here in Teaneck. And Rabbi Pruzansky has left Teaneck and moved to Israel. So he has done his aliyah. He was willing to talk to me. I got the impression that he felt like I was a wayward son, and that he would convince me gently to come back into the fold. And of course that didn't happen. But he wanted me to know that not only was he having this real estate sales event in the synagogue, but he was specifically having it in the sanctuary of the synagogue, in the place where they have religious services. Now, B'nai Yeshurun is a big complex. They've got a catering facility. Okay, they have another room they could have had this event. He told me that they were having it in the sanctuary because he considers the redemption of the land to be a religious duty. And redemption of the land, that was a slogan that I heard a lot growing up being raised Zionist.
Okay.
We're redeeming the land. What does redemption of the land mean in practical terms? It's the most racist thing you could imagine. It's this idea that putting Jews on the land and taking Muslims and Christians off the land makes the land holier. It makes the, I mean,
Oh my God.
well, it's pretty awful, but that's what's happening here. They're having these events in synagogues not only to try to conceal it from the general public, but also because they consider it to be a religious activity.
Wow. And what kind of property are they selling? Finished houses, vacant land?
I think a whole range of things, and
Okay.
I actually don't have that information. I know that when I was when I attended an event as a fake customer, the property that I was going to buy, or was actually never going to buy, was a condo in an apartment complex in an illegal West Bank settlement close to Jerusalem. So.
Gotcha. And we talked about this earlier, and I have only a vague understanding of it, and you've already indicated that it's not something you're aware of, but the process of real estate development in general is you buy something raw or you steal something, in this case, and then you go through various stages of development. And it sounds like one of the final stages of the real estate, quote, I mean, I don't even want to call it a real estate development process because it's not, it's a criminal enterprise. But one of the final stages of this real estate-based criminal enterprise is the selling of the final product to, it sounds like, Orthodox Jews through synagogues in North America and probably other countries too, wherever there's money to be had.
Right.
And so not only are you helping, Rich, are you helping shed light on a crime and an injustice to humanity, you're also making a little dent on the financial underpinnings that's holding up the whole system. And this is why the Zionist operatives are so worried about, and I always get the acronym wrong, boycott,
Yes.
BDS,
BDS.
boycott,
Boycott, divestment, sanctions.
divestment sanctions, right? So, I mean, this is a tried and true technique for dealing with the misbehavior of any.
Absolutely.
If you don't like a guy, you don't like the way he runs his store, you think he abuses customers, he abuses his employees, you don't shop there. Problem solved, right? So there's nothing violent or anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic about it. But I'll tell you, even my own, I have to confess, I went to Princeton to my great disgrace. A friend of mine burned his Princeton diploma, and I'm about to join him soon. They literally, in the letters to the editor, publish, as of this late date, the claim that BDS is an eliminationist movement, that its end goal is the destruction of all of Jews on earth. This is in Princeton University. They print a letter like that from an alumni.
Well, I know, but I mean, look what happened at Harvard, and where the president had to resign over the slogan "From the river to the sea." And what was it? Another school too? Was it Penn?
Yeah, I think it was Penn.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, our universities are not terribly bright these days, are they?
They really aren't. They really aren't. And you kind of, I've studied a lot of history and history of war and the history of war propaganda, and you cannot have a war. And I don't even call this a war, it's a massacre, it's an ongoing massacre.
Yeah,
you can't have an ongoing massacre without having a psychological operations division. And they were bombarding the media from day one with, you can't say from the river to the sea. You can't talk about BDS. What was the other one that drove? Oh, you can't, Intifada apparently translates to kill all Jews. It's like, well, gee, it doesn't really
Apparently.
mean it. Apparently, there is a language called Arabic. It has a dictionary. That's not what intifada means. It's just
It means
uprising.
uprising.
Yeah.
Uprising.
Yeah.
For your
Yeah, for people that
for your listeners who don't know, it
Yeah.
means uprising.
So they literally
Oh.
went, I mean, the people behind the propaganda are ingenious. They literally went in, they found every single legitimate thing anybody could say about this, and they painted it as, well, that's obviously anti-Semitic.
Well, look, you got to look at the cult mentality of it.
Mm.
And I'm observing this cult mentality in one of our town council members. I feel like I can talk about her because she's got this Facebook page that's open to the public, and I'm reading it. Her name is Hillary Goldberg. And she and another council member, Mark Schwartz, both attended this real estate event that I organized the demonstration against. All right. And actually, I don't want to be a liar. I didn't organize that demonstration. I said that I was going to at the council meeting.
Yeah.
But when that video went viral, I was so busy with interviews that I didn't have time to organize it. And it was organized around me. So many people wanted to do it that it just kind of happened. And then I went. But anyway, if you go down all of her Facebook posts, it's just about anti-Semitism, 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 anti-Semitism. And she talks about being so scared at the demonstration.
Right.
So horrified that she didn't feel safe going home. And so I felt compelled to send her a private email. And I said, Ms. Goldberg, there was nothing and nobody there for you to be afraid of. I mean, basically, they see a keffiyeh and they're scared.
Right, right, right.
Okay. And they see a Palestinian flag. Oh, it all means kill Jews to them.
Right, exactly.
This is the mentality. So I sent her an email. I said, Ms. Goldberg, there was nothing and nobody there for you to be afraid of. And I gave her my phone number. I said, and if you ever feel afraid like that again, call me or text me. I'll escort you home myself. But this is what we're up against. It's a cult. They're in their own little bubble. Anybody who objects to anything that they do is an anti-Semite and wants to kill all the Jews. I mean, this is what it's come down to. It's Jim Jones telling everybody to drink the damn Kool-Aid because everybody's against us.
Right. This
is what's happening, but it's got global political reach and it's committing genocide on a massive scale. It's the same mechanism that I'm sorry?
And these beautiful people are being slaughtered. These beautiful people.
Yeah. It's a daily heartbreak. It's just awful.
Well, and I'm hoping, we had the first generation, let's say your parents, and I'm from a whole different tradition, but there was indoctrination was in the air in the 1950s and 60s, it was just a lot of indoctrination going on. And for whatever reason, it seems like our generation, certainly the younger people, they're just not buying it to the degree that our parents
They're not buying it. And I tell you what, once this generation comes of age, Zionism will be over. I really feel that way. The only problem is we can't wait that long because people are dying now.
Right. Right. Well, you're certainly doing your bit, and this real estate angle is very important to expose, and because it's the tip of the iceberg that you can it's a thread, and if you follow that thread, it tells the whole story. The support of the genocide, the support of the illegal occupations. Well, Rich, it's been great talking to you. Thank you for giving us so much time today. What do you recommend for people to do? Is there an organization that you particularly like that's doing good work, or way to follow you, or follow people that are carrying on this particular initiative?
Well, there are lots of good organizations. I actually lead one, but I inherited the leadership of Deir Yassin Remembered from Dan McGowan, who retired. And I confess I haven't done much with it yet. I mean, the website is up. The only way that we used to give a lot of Palestinian students scholarships. And I'd like to get that started again. And we also had a program, we used to try to get billboards up supporting the
Mm,
Palestinians.
mm.
And I was assigned that for a period of time, and it was impossible. I mean, I see pro-Palestine billboards up now, so things have changed. But it used to be, I call a billboard company and you know, I caution them that what I'm gonna ask them to put up is a little bit controversial, and they were like, "Don't worry, as long as it's not obscenity or pornography or cuss words, we'll put it up."
Right.
And then they go and discuss it with their superiors, and they come back to me and say, "Well, we really can't put anything up there that supports the Palestinians or says anything bad about Israel."
And you
And they
can't,
were just they were surprised to have to tell me that. You
yeah,
know,
because
because
from their point of view is if they don't sell that space, it's just
right, right.
no money coming in.
They're not used to saying no to anybody.
And
But
now
they
this
said no to
is an
me.
important distinction. So you can't even be pro-Palestinians
Correct.
in a billboard in those days.
Well, those days, a couple of years ago, you know,
No.
pretty recently. That's changing now. So anyway, I lead up Deir Yassin Remembered, and I'm only set up to get donations by checks, and that's at deiryassin.org. And I realize that's totally old school, and I have to get set up to accept donations online. Many wonderful organizations that help.
I know
the
there's a group,
Palestinians.
I know an acronym, it's CAIR.
That's the Council on American Islamic Relations. That they're very good. I mean, here there's American Muslims Palestine. There's Playgrounds for Palestine. I mean, if I start naming charities, I'm going to feel bad that I left any out. There's Palestine Children Relief Fund, is it called? Yeah.
So there's many. So the point is, if someone, let's say somebody wants to do something, one thing is just look around your neighborhood. There may be activism going on.
Right.
And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to find. I'm trying, believe it or not, after being involved in this, I mean, this has not been my main issue, but I've had a toe in it since 1997.
Right.
And I'm trying to, I live kind of in the countryside. I'm up in Tivoli, which is just north of Rhinebeck, across the river from Woodstock. Okay. Sonny Rollins used to live up the street in Germantown. So, I mean, but we're kind of in the woods here, sort of. Some people still have cows and orchards and stuff. But it might be hard to find a group to work with, but keep looking, and you can certainly go to the web. And if you just Palestine support, you'll probably find an abundance.
Yes, absolutely. Just Google it, and different charities will come up. And you know, another thing that people can do, and it's what I do, is I pick up Jewish newspapers and I find out about Zionist activities. I find out about real estate sales events in synagogues. I find out about, you know, the Friends of the IDF fundraising dinner. And, you know, there are many different Zionist events that they publicize only within their own publications. And, you know, if you become interested in opposing Zionism, you find out what they're doing and demonstrate against them. I mean, that's what I've been doing for a bunch of years.
Gotcha. This is a crazy sidebar, but it's applicable. You remember Oliver North and Iran-Contra and all that? You know, he's running cocaine and bringing. The other thing he was a big fundraiser. He used to go to, you know, super conservative American banquets and raise gazillion. So that was part the fundraise. So when you go after the fundraising stuff, and I mean, you know, Friends of the IDF. My God, at this point, give me a break. You know. But if you attack the fundraising and income generating part of this beast, you're really doing something substantial, actually. If you're disrupting it. So anyway,
I think we cost them a few dollars in Brooklyn the other night. I'm happy about that. Even though they went online, I think it was probably a smaller event because they couldn't have it in person.
And hopefully somebody who's supposed to be, you know, enforcing the laws will look at these events and say, you know what, you can't have a white only, you can't have Jews only either. You just can't do that in real estate
Well,
anymore.
that's what makes sense to me, but I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
we have people who are really looking at the legality of
here's
this.
what I know about, here's what I know about the law. You got to get a DA to give a damn.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
that, believe
Absolutely.
me, and if their friend, and if their personal ox or the ox of their friends is being gored, they're going to let it continue.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's the DAs are not objective, law-loving people. They're politicians usually. That's just a fact. There may be some exceptions, but they're political beasts. And but there may be there may be a DA that will stand up and say, you know what, I'm reading this law here. You're violating it. We're going to have the police come and inform you that you can't do it. And if you persist, maybe you'll be taken away in handcuffs for engaging in a criminal enterprise. Yeah. I mean, I can't sell crack on the street because it's a crime, right? And if I do it and somebody catches me, I should be in handcuffs.
Well, it's been an education for me because I really thought that it was cut and dry, that, we can't have real estate sales for one group of people only. I mean,
Yeah.
I really thought that the Civil Rights Act and the Fair Housing Act took care of that. And maybe it did, and maybe there are loopholes, and that's for the lawyers to figure out.
Gotcha.
But it's certainly, these real estate events certainly violate the spirit of anti-discrimination law. And, they violate international law. That's pretty black and white.
Well, I look at it as kind of a fencing operation. In other words, this property's been stolen and now they're selling it to people. That's what a fence does.
Well, and the angle that's served by having these sales events here is that in Israel, most Israelis know that the settlements are a lost cause, with the exception of the ideological zealots who are determined to have every square inch of that land. Israelis don't want to live in settlements, other than there are some that are an easy commute from Jerusalem and they're cheaper because they're settlements. So those are popular. But, most Israelis don't want to go out, in the Hebron Hills and,
Oh, wow.
But it's the American Zionist Jewish zealots who still have this utopian view, this of what Zionism is supposed to be, and they're so knowing the real estate companies, knowing that the settlements are kind of a lost cause in Israel itself, they're getting the money from the
I got it.
ideologues in the United States and Canada.
So this is even more sinister. It's sinister topped on sinister. In other words, not only is the land stolen, not only is it being sold under discriminatory conditions, but they're selling land that a sane Israeli, when we'll put that in quotes because I'm not sure how many of them are sane anymore, a sane Israeli wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole.
Correct.
So this is literally, and besides being a humanitarian atrocity, this is just an old-fashioned real estate development scam. I mean, from my point of view,
I believe it is.
Yeah.
I believe it is.
Wow.
But, that being said, there are people there are Jews from New Jersey who go and live in a hilltop on the West Bank, and they're very satisfied that they've made Aliyah and they've fulfilled their Jewishness in their view of, in their perverse view of Judaism, because it's really not Judaism.
Yeah.
I had a correspondence with a settler from Teaneck who was living in Beit Yatir in the settlement, and I became acquainted with her attitude. Yeah, I guess we covered it. Huh?
Yeah. Thank you so much. This is great. I think we went to a lot of interesting areas. Thanks again for your time.
And we took a lot of time. But so what are you going to do with this?
This will get edited, and I'm going to broadcast it on Brass Check. That's about 20,000 email subscribers, which is worth about 200,000 Facebook followers. Email, when you have an email address, you've really got connections with people. I'm going to try to get this Katie Halper, who I know she already expressed a desire to, I don't know her personally, but I have her email. She's got a bigger, huge show devoted specifically to this topic. She lost her
Okay.
job at the Hill for being against apartheid in Palestine. How do you like that? In
I
Israel.
like that.
But she does a show every night. She's fantastic. So I'm going to send this to her. I'm going to like, Katie, get Rich on. I'm going to maybe even make it into an article, and I'll send it to you before it comes out so you can, review it. And I'm going to keep interviewing people like yourself who were once either in this thing and now they realize, my God, what's going on? I'm out. I'm going to fight it. And I might put that together into a series, so that people,
Okay.
because there's a lot of people still, who say, oh, I can't say anything about this because I'm not Jewish. Well, I'm going to go, well, here's a lot of Jewish people that are saying something. Yes, you can say something. You can step up. That's a lot. There's a lot of people sitting on the sidelines because of that very issue. They're like, well, the Jews have been through so much. I don't want to criticize them. This is,
Well, I know. And you know what? You were asking me before to suggest what people can do.
yeah,
Here's a really important thing that people can do. When you hear somebody Jewish saying something that's wrong, call them out on it. All right? The Holocaust ended in 1945. So, and I'm speaking as someone who's had, I'm speaking as someone with family members who were murdered by the Nazis. Okay. I mean, they were murdered before I was born. I didn't meet them.
yeah,
But it did affect my family. So there was a period of time when the wretched of the world were Jewish refugees
mm-hmm.
in camps after the war. That's over. The wretched of the world are in Gaza now. The wretched of the world are the victims of Jewish Zionism now. We don't have to tiptoe around Jewish sensibilities anymore. When Jewish people are wrong, they need to be called out on it.
Gotcha. That's there's a famous saying, my country right or wrong.
Oh,
But listen, there's
that's
another
the
part.
wrongest thing.
They cut that in half. He said, my country right or wrong, and when wrong, correct it. They cut the, yeah. Anyway, well, I'll let you go.